My name is Schadler. I'm class of 2007. In the last 4 years, I've been working with teenagers at a nonprofit and writing a novel that I finished last week. I'm going to read the sexiest part of my latest short story. 2 pages. It's called What Keeps You, What Lets You Go. Yeah. I was going to leave those out. Yeah, I have stuff in West Branch right now in paper darts online, and I have something coming up in the Denver Quarterly in the fall, and the Southern Review a few years ago. And my short story collection was chosen as a finalist for the Flannery O'Connor Short Story Collection. I don't even like saying that out loud. Okay. This is what keeps you, what lets you go. They weren't having a love affair. They'd never once fucked each other. He wasn't even a real man. He was an irresistible reptile from invisible swampland. He was a photograph of someone's grandfather on a motorcycle, a house she broke into and unfurled the copper wire from. She lay in spools of him. He was hours of her darkest thought. He was her husband in some other life, some fitful reincarnated marriage, a hairline fracture or punishment or gift. Remember this. She looked very hard at the curtains of his bedroom window. She would remember them, the quality of light behind the thin fabric. She would remember her knees like radiating moons under his quilt, her hair tangled against his pillows. This was a place she wasn't allowed to be, full of unfamiliar objects she wasn't allowed to touch. Yet he was alive every day in this place, wearing clothes and walking onto the porch, cooking, leaving dishes in the sink. She didn't know what to say to him, and so tried very hard to say nothing. She cultivated a boldness that might turn her life into stories to tell him. Yet they were as close as any two people could be. Her fingers rested on the nerves inside the crook of his elbow, a last will and testament embroidered in plum thread. "Let me," he said. Buried parts of her ached and tried to wrench free. The passage of time would eventually wash this night of its more saturated hues, until it was a dimly lit thing she wouldn't recognize herself as a participant in, like chairs tossed in river water, displaced and reflecting upward, something encoded. They both lived lives after all, days and days worth, but life is not that long. And it was hard to feel any future when he lifted her leg up and put his mouth behind her knee, when he said, "This is how I would touch you. This is how I think of you." He was the space between her dress and skin. No other man had hands or eyes or even a voice, and no one would ever feel him as she did. Anyone else they might someday love was someone they didn't even know yet, in this moment when he put his swarming, brazen mouth on hers, when her throat was full of golden winged insects, when she dropped her forehead to his chest and the mercurial heart floating there, when she pressed her hands to the cool of his bedroom wall, when she grabbed his hair in her fist. His hair was beginning to show gray. In her absence, he'd grown older. This was his bed, a place he slept alone when she was gone, a place he'd been with someone else and would be with someone else again, a place where her bare legs tangled in soft gray sheets and he was everywhere around her. Uncertainty was hers alone, echoes within echoes. He made the world a place with empty rooms and hauntings and seasons that melted or froze, and hot pink swirls that bloomed inside her skull, and other things to relish. Now, Their clothes separated them like teenagers who weren't ready yet. He pushed his leg between hers. The pleasure of it was like the shock of an injury, every type and variation of sadness. She was made up of the most terrible blue electricity. The obvious answer would be to wrap her legs around him, press her heels to his spine, and just give him up for good. They ought to have ruined it sooner and better. He touched the bruise on her arm. Her ribs and wrists and ankles turned to hard crystal as he encircled them. She touched each of his wolf teeth. "Come here," he said, though she was right there. He must have known that soon she wouldn't be, that most of the time she wasn't, and that she wouldn't be again.